I would say for children, there is a lot of evidence on really concerning effects on cognitive development, psychological studies and brain imaging studies showing how kids who are exposed to screens excessively basically have lower cognitive assessment results. And when you look at the brain imaging of the brains of these kids compared to kids who use screens less, there are differences in the brain scans. So that's one very concerning area.
Have cell phones forever changed the way we relate to each other?
I think they have. I think not from the first moment we got our flip phones, but from the moment we got the smartphones, things started changing, because at that point we could suddenly do everything on the go, not just make phone calls, but text, order groceries, read anything. And we just stopped paying attention to where we were and just only focus on our phone.
It's pretty incredible, because do we even remember what life was before that? I mean, have we lost that memory?
Well, I think some of us do, but some of us who are younger basically grew up in this era. So young adults may barely remember a different time. I would say it was around 2009. So 14 years ago, there are college students who probably don't remember anything else.
Yeah. I remember I was driving around with my partner recently, and I go, what did we do before maps on our phone? And she was like, well, we knew how to drive. We remember the streets. We actually had that part of our memory, really activated and going. And I was like, that's wild how much we've depended over the past few years.
Yeah, I love it when we walk with our phones in the street and we look at where we are. We don't even look up to see the address, which might be right next to us. We're still relying on the phone.
Mm-hmm, I know. And it happens more often than not. I mean, go to your nearest bus station and you'll see it yourself how disconnected we are from each other. Okay, so you got this book out, and it's basically that the telling us of what happened, right? You mentioned around like 2009, and when I was reading in the book, I go, what was I doing in 2009? And then I remember that was when I sort of switched from that. I had a LG chocolate. That was the little, for people viewing and listening, remember that one? That was a blast from the past. And then that moved to the BlackBerry. And like you said, I had everything on there. All of a sudden, I had email there. I had all my texts going through there, my calls, and I had internet, right? And life changed completely. So in your research and everything you've been compiling, what have been some of the top, most surprising things that you've learned about cell phones since then?
I have learned a few things. I'm not sure it's just cell phones, by the way. I think it's the fact that we are more and more enmeshed in our screens everywhere. I think cell phones were a huge thing that contributed to that. So one thing I've learned is the impact on all of us. And I think for a while, people didn't realize what was happening because it sort of happened to us gradually. Nobody ever said, I want to spend 5 hours on my phone alone. It just happened through small decisions we made, like starting to use email on the go or adopting an app. And then data started coming out on the impact on adults and children. And at first, people just said, well, when there's a new technology, people always say bad things about it. But the evidence just kept growing and growing. And I would say for children, there is a lot of evidence on really concerning effects on basically cognitive development, psychological studies, and brain imaging studies showing how kids who are exposed to screens excessively, which are many of them, basically have lower cognitive assessment results. And when you look at the brain imaging of the brains of these kids compared to kids who use screens less, there are differences in the brain scans. So that's one very concerning area. Impact on mental health. There's been tons of news about that. How spending so much time online, and especially in social networks, has a big impact on attention, obesity, and then for all of us, general impact on how connected we feel to each other, how happy we feel, how people are more focused on anger and hate. All of this has come up.
If you've been feeling stressed lately, let me take a quick pause and talk to you about something that is one of my top supplements across the board, and it's magnesium, but it's BioOptimizer's Magnesium Breakthrough. Every time I've been using Magnesium Breakthrough, part of my nightly routine, I've been able to sleep better, but also what I notice is stress levels improve. But for me, the magnesium is best for my body. It relaxes my muscles. It takes away that inflammation, especially because I've been doing a lot of athletic stuff lately. So unlike any other magnesium supplement that might be giving you one or two different forms of magnesium, I really love this one. This one's the best one's out there. This one is the best one out there. Magnesium Breakthrough contains all 7 forms of magnesium designed to help calm your mind, help you fall asleep, stay asleep, and wake up refreshed. Don't miss out on having the best magnesium out there. It's going to help you with your sleep. It's going to help you with your body. It's going to help you with your cognition. It's the best. Now, for an exclusive offer to the Heal Thyself listener, you, go to magbreakthrough.com/DRG. And I want you to use the code DRG during checkout, and you're going to save 10%. Your body and your brain will thank you. Mine has. Nurture your mind and your body with an all-natural, full-spectrum magnesium supplement. Simply go to magbreakthrough.com/DRG and use promo code DRG during checkout, and you're going to save 10%. All right, everyone, this is an old school partner, one of the ones since the beginning, but we love them to this day, always. I love my Birch mattress. Sleep, sleep, sleep is one of the most important pillars to health. I talk about Birch so much on my show. This is a premium mattress in a box company. It makes mattresses and sleep products that are stylish, comfortable, and environmentally conscious. They have organic, non-toxic mattresses made right here in the United States. And for me, it was super important to choose a mattress that is made with organic and natural materials because I can sleep comfortably knowing I'm avoiding harmful chemicals that come from the manufacturing process. And these chemicals off-gas for the life of the bed, whether or not they have a smell. Now, the Birch mattresses are one of the best. They have the Green Guard Gold certification. The stamp is right there. And what that means is that they're testing for thousands of different chemicals that can be volatile, that you can breathe in for the life of the mattress. Now, Birch mattress is breathable, keeps you cool at night, supportive to pressure points, allergen and mildew resistant. It's made out of raw materials, sourced straight from nature. It's amazing. With your Birch mattress, you get a 100-night sleep trial, along with a 25-year warranty. The best part of all this, it delivers right to your door. It's in a box. It's easy to set up. I love my Birch mattress. I think you will too. If you're looking for a new bed, check out Birch. You can click the link below or go to birchliving.com/heal thyself to get 20% off of your mattress and 2 free pillows. If you're looking for a new mattress for your little ones, guess what? They got a Birch Kids line. Check that out. Over the years, as we become more addicted to this world that we're in, let's go back to the kids, because there's a lot of young parents who watch this show. There's a lot of older parents who have older kids who watch this show. But cell phones have been a big part of these children's lives for quite a while, even the ones that were just born maybe 5 or 6 years ago. So in all of this research, what you've been seeing, we learned about the brain imaging. Your professional opinion, how deeply are cell phones affecting children's health?
I think being on screen is a huge problem. The younger the kids are, the worse it is, but we're not just talking about toddlers or people in elementary school. Even for teens, there's a big impact. And the thing is, with small children, in a way, it's easier. You can just not give them screens. You don't have to give your old toddler a screen or a cell phone. But it becomes much more complicated when the kids go to middle school and their life revolves again around social networks, and cell phones mean independence, and there are no public phones around even. So it becomes, there's no middle way option. It's basically you give it to them and then they're sort of gone.
It's true. And what is the repercussions? What is the repercussions? What do you foresee in the future happening for a kid who's born into the world where part of their reality that they're experiencing is a screen? What is the predisposition long term?
I think, the way they interact changes because, and there's lots of data about that, the kids today, teens, they do not meet in person much. I think it's basically less than half than in the 1980s. They don't go to parties much. They stay home and they interact on the screen. They basically prefer to interact through writing, not through talking. And the thing is, there's an impact of how they feel. They don't end up feeling good through that. These hours on the screen alone, our brains are not wired for that. There are lots of studies from happiness studies showing that this is not, everybody knew for a long time that long-term relationships are important for happiness, but this is not just about long-term relationships. There are studies showing that if a person just talks to somebody in person, whether it's kids playing in the playground or just talking in the street, saying hi, saying a few words, it affects our brains in a way that basically increases our level of happiness. And when this is missing from our life, there's this feeling of discontent, which also we've seen more alarmingly for kids, a huge rise in suicide rates and anxiety and depression, which sort of started to go up from 2010. And at first it was not clear if it was that or other factors playing in here, but I think there's enough studies showing that screens and social networks as well have a big role in this.
100%. And we think about social media, right? We feel in many ways artificially connected via our cell phones. But you're saying the importance of that, and there's data out there showing that human connection, speaking to someone, actually changes our physiology in our body, increases our mood, makes us feel better, makes us feel healthier. And one part of the book that really stood out for me was the part that you just said. 50% or so decrease in just children being active and social and outside. They're indoors. And I was thinking to myself, when was the last time that I saw kids riding the bike all throughout town? Kids in the middle of the street playing street ball, basketball, baseball. When I grew up, that's all you saw. You can go up 3 blocks, 4 blocks, there's another set of kids playing. And it was much more communal. Do you think that we'll ever go back to that?
You know, I'm an optimist, and I think a few things happen together which give me hope that things will change. The first thing is all the data I mentioned. I think at this point it's pretty clear that there's a public health crisis for kids, and I think that politicians on both sides of the aisle realize that and are trying to change things. So that's one important thing. We also know who is responsible. I mean, it's clear that technology companies are addicting all of us to stay online for longer because that's the whole business model. The business model is based on our time and our data, and they need to keep us there for as long as possible to collect data on us, and so they can target more advertising to us. And then we have evidence from whistleblowers like Frances Hogan, who worked at Facebook and talked about how Facebook, that owned Instagram, knew the whole time what was going on, that addicting kids was affecting their mental health, but kept going. So we have so much information. And then we also have the pandemic. And I think the pandemic sort of change things, because before we were sort of heading into this insane trajectory of more screens and more screens and more immersion. But we, especially through lockdown, and I live here in New York City, where lockdown was very, very long, we felt what it means to be in front of screens the whole time, in our bodies, in our minds, how horrible we felt, how much we yearned to have his social connection. Before the pandemic, you know, the online education was what everybody wanted. Well, when it became the only option, students didn't want to go to college. They deferred. They wanted to be in the classroom with other people. So I think this realization, together with the data, together with the evidence, I think gives me room for hope that things will change, and I think things are already changing.
Oh, I love to hear the optimistic view, because that makes me feel good. Something that always stuck out is that whistleblower that you mentioned, that I remember hearing about these reports that aside from having the knowledge that this is affecting us, continuously putting out the addictive model of keeping our time and attention which is, I remember seeing a post somewhere, maybe it was on Instagram, that said, those are our two most valuable resources right now because we're giving it up so fast. Time and attention is something that the presence to be with someone is now valuable. Something that was sort of naturally occurring before the cell phone is now so, so valuable. So I wanted to go to the part about mood and feeling connected. When we have a cell phone in front of us, how deeply is it affecting, let's say our kid is at the dinner table, we're all eating alone, and the moment our kid takes out the phone and is on the phone, how deeply is it affecting our social connection? The addiction, how deeply is it connecting us to feel more alone, more socially isolated? Have you seen any of that when you came across the data that you put in your book?
No, I've seen it, and also it's interesting because when one person picks up the phone, it affects everybody else. It affects relationships because some people just tend to use the phone more than others. And the thing is, if you have a partner or if you have a parent who's always on the phone, you feel isolated. And also, if you're a child, you're more likely to end up using the phone more. That's what the data shows. So in a way, it's a bit like when you think about secondhand smoke. So people who were not smoking were affected by smoking. This is a bit like this, because even those who are not heavy users, and we are all pretty heavy users of this tech, end up being affected in how much satisfaction they get from social connection.
And I want everyone viewing and listening to think about this. How often you see, let's say you're at dinner and you're with you're a bunch of friends, and the conversation kind of died down, it's getting more quiet, and when somebody takes out their phone, immediately that's the permission for everyone else around you to take out the phone. And next thing you know, you look up and everyone at the dinner table's on their phone. An experience like that is just is incredible to see. Like you said, secondhand smoke. One opening of that creates everyone else affected by it. And psychologically, what's happening?
Yeah, I think it's even more than that. In a way, if you're sitting with a friend in a restaurant and they start doing something on their phone, it's impolite to sort of stare at them. It's sort of a norm to take out your phone too, because now you have something to do.
Right. And that's part of like our human nature, right? Like how uncomfortable it is to sit here and do this. You mentioned something, obesity, the depression, right? The sense of loneliness. How rampant is it right now? How rampant are people feeling more socially isolated and depressed? And how much do you think cell phone use really has to do with that?
Well, I think the rates of depression, as I said before, basically, it was not clear whether it was the screens or other things that were happening at the same time. For example, around the same time, the trend of overparenting came into effect, and parents were monitoring their kids all the time. So it took a while to sort of disentangle this. But I think at a certain point, the studies were able to show that there was a connection between depression and the screens. And the thing is, and I think also what I want to emphasize, it's not, cell phones is one thing, but not all content is the same. I mean, reading the New York Times on your cell phone is not the same as being on social media or in a game or getting emails and texts when you constantly get these dopamine boosts. So you have this thing that's called the intermittent reward model. And so you basically, the idea is that our brain's neurotransmitter dopamine is exerted at larger quantities if we get a reward or not on a regular basis. So many of these designs online are there to once in a while give us a reward. So we never know when we're going to get a like or a comment or some addictive features in games called loot boxes. So, or when you go on Tinder, you don't know when you swipe when you're going to get a match. So that's different than just reading something on your phone. And I think it's important to make this distinction because my goal is not to say all of this has to go. We're never going back, but some of this has to go.
Yeah, and we think about just that. We think about how are we using our phones? What is the what is the window of knowledge? Are we learning more? Or are we just putting that aside and, completely immersing ourselves in those dopamine hits over and over and over? I would actually say probably the latter is true for most people. There's not many people reading news articles, and I don't speak for everyone, but all day reading news articles and learning and gaining their knowledge.
Yeah, I think it's mixed. I think in some way, yes, a lot of what people do today is that. But I do believe, at least this is my anecdotal point of view, I think my kids know much more than I knew at their age, because they do have access to much more information than I had. So that's there, and that's the part we do want to keep. We just and want to keep all these hours that are sucked, because the fact that we're not autonomously choosing how much time we spend online is part of the problem. That if I pick up my phone and I have something intentional I want to do, I really wanted to read the most recent news, but then I end up scrolling for the next 10, 20, 30 minutes, that is the problem.
That's the big upside is yes, there is access to information. And I know more about things that I haven't known. I've listened to so many podcasts and having that accessibility that I didn't have 10, 15 years ago. But like you said, we're slowly, after we do our thing and we learn, let me open up social media. 2 hours later, how did I get into this doom scrolling that I've been doing for so long? And it was interesting. I was at this event and I was talking to this guy, and he actually went as far as getting another cell phone, getting another number, and that cell phone only being closest friends, family, no social media on it, just music and maps. That's all. And he uses that cell phone for most of the day, and anything else he needs to do, he like for work or whatever, social media, he uses the other cell phone. And I was thinking about it, I was like, have we come to that I actually am considering paying another monthly bill for another cell phone just to keep the sanity?
Right, I think and this really illustrates something. We do not have a middle-of-the-road phone. There are, some phones for children, and there are some attempts, something called a light phone. They try to design something like that. It doesn't have all the capabilities. But you don't see Apple, for example, coming up with a phone which just has, doesn't let you go on the internet, but has what you might need. You might have just the maps function or an alarm and, texts and maybe even emails but the thing is, right now, if you want to get something like this, either you get another phone like you described, or you get something that's not really mainstream. And one of the things that I think need to happen is to get the mainstream options to not just glow at you and constantly send you notifications as your default option.
Yeah, it's the day I wish for that phone. I wish for Apple to release a phone where they go, hey, because it's our due diligence and our duty to make sure that our consumers actually, are healthy. I think that's what a good company does. They'll be able to have that out there for once. But yeah, it does illustrate where we are. It's either black or white. Like you're going to have this cell phone, or you're going to have to get another cell phone and just have nothing on it. What are some of the biggest, most powerful tips at sort of stepping away from that addictive tendency? What are some of maybe the resources, some things that you found to start bringing back that presence, that time, that reducing that addiction and connection? Have you found anything?
Well, I think there's some things people can do themselves, but there's something that's important that people do first is to stop blaming themselves. Because I think the way that the tech companies have created this is for us to think that we are the choosers and we are responsible. That's why they created all these help tools on the phone. Like you have Apple Screen Time, tells you how much time you spent online. You can turn off your apps if you want to. You can turn your phone gray. Of course, these are not the default options. And basically what we think is it's our fault. We're not doing this well enough. It's our kid's fault. He's an addict. It's our family's fault. Something is wrong here. So the first thing to do is to know that this is an uphill battle we're fighting against, and things will have to change in the public sphere. So I think people should start thinking about shifting from these internal battles with themselves and with their family to fighting in the public sphere. And partly is what's already been done legally, but partly I think every person can make a difference collectively, and I'll explain what I mean. I think schools is in a very important place because right now in schools the policy, the federal policy, is the more technology the better. That's how schools get funding, and it's been the policy for over a decade. The studies have not shown that students learn better from screens. Actually, the opposite. And since the pandemic, teachers got used to teaching with screens. So now we have the bad guys of the tech industry in the classroom. We have kids learning from Minecraft and Roblox. And we have teachers posting on TikTok. So this, and the thing is, does not remain in the classroom, because if your kids works in screens in school, homework is in screens as well. If Minecraft is legitimized by school, how can you tell your kid to get off Minecraft? So I think a very important place that people can change things is going to schools, because whether on the school level or the district level, and insisting that they assess whether technology is useful for its purpose or not, and not just shove any possible technology at the students. I'm not sure that a middle schooler should have open Wi-Fi in the classroom and try to concentrate where they can go online.
Yeah.
And so I think that's just one of many examples where all of us can do things, but not by fighting with ourselves.
I see. So when we have a parent who's listening to this and they go, okay, my kid sounds exactly like the school that my kid is at. Do they go to the superintendent? Do they go to the school board? How do we empower people to start making a difference in groups?
I would go to the principal, go work for the PTA, and it really depends on the type of school district. You can be active in the school district. There are always parents committees, parents are representatives. There's so much that can be done.
Yeah, makes sense.
Even speaking to the teacher, that is crucial, because you can delay things for the kids at least.
Yeah. So and that's the reason, because when I went to school, we had none of that, right? We had books and each other. So we have yet to see the full expanse of how this is going to play out. But I'm with you. I actually do believe that it's not a good thing. It's not a good thing to be inundated with technology, losing the value of presence. In many ways, social skills, right? If during recess, most of the kids aren't playing and a lot of them are on their phones during this time, I mean, what are we doing?
No, I think that's actually a very important point, the cell phones, because France banned cell phones in schools even during recess. And quite a few schools and districts in the US have banned phones, many of them during classes, but some actually during lunch and recess as well. So that's one thing where parents can be proactive, asking the school to ban the cell phones so kids talk to each other during recess and lunch.
What a world that would be, right? The kids talk to each other during recess and lunch, right? Coming back to, being a kid, connecting, making friends, but real friends, being in groups, playing sports. But what would you say then to the parents, whether it's single parent, two parents? What would you say to the ones that go, okay, you know what, but I need a break. My kid, I need to give them the iPad. My kid, I need to give them the cell phone, because this is when they stop crying, or finally I can get my tasks done. Is there a healthy way to balance screen time for children, for the parents out there?
I think it's very hard. It's a very hard job, because it's so easy to give them the iPad. So you can do what you can do. But I do think that you can try not to create new norms where you give your kids the iPad. For example, in New York City, now you go to restaurants, most families come with iPads for the kids, but if you can bring something else, you can bring crayons. That's one example. I was on holidays recently, and I was looking at the pool, and I couldn't believe what I saw. There was a family with a 9-year-old and 11-year-old girls, and the mom gave them both these plastic pouches to put the cell phones, the smartphones in there, so when they were in the water, they could be on their phones. So
Wow.
that's the kind of norms that, we can stop before they become reality.
I was just thinking about playing in the community pool when I was a kid, and how that would be seen back in the early 90s as alien. Like, what
Right.
is happening here? And how, in, over 30 years, it's become so normalized. So, super important, super important. I actually did a show a few years ago talking about the effect of screen time. And actually, there should be a cutoff uh, about when it comes to screen time. Children shouldn't really be on the phones more than 2 hours, or the iPad for more than 2 hours. 3 hours, then we're going to start getting worried about how it's affecting their brain. And you mentioned early on, it does affect their brain. Where are these kids going? Where is their cognitive potential headed? Has it been reduced just because they're staring at phones at such an early developmental place?
Yeah, that's what seems to be happening. And especially part of the problem is that some of these most addictive things are sold to parents as educational games. So one of the things I recommend in the book is basically have ratings for addiction for games. So can you imagine before a parent download a game, if they could see how addictive the game was, they would not download that game. And I predict that what would happen is that the game manufacturers would start designing the games differently. They would take out some of these addictive features because they want the parent to download the games. So things could start changing through that.
Yeah, and to me, that's a possibility, because I remember when I played video games, there would be a rating. So we would know, okay, my mom would be like, oh, this one has blood and guts and gore. You're too young for this. Movies, it always have a rating. My mom would
Right.
go, hey, you can't watch this movie. You're too young for this. You're too young for this. So I think the natural evolution, hopefully, as at some point, these computer games having that. Okay, so now we know how cell phones have affected children's brains, cognition, adults alike, mood, obesity. We talked about relationships, how it's affecting relationships. We talked about literally the secondhand smoke effect of cell phones. Is there anything that was most important for you that we didn't cover that's really essential that we need to know?
I think it's important for people to realize that there's already a movement for change, that things have already changed out. Lots of parents who are suing game makers in class actions, suing for addicting their kids, suing social networks for addicting their kids. Schools are suing social networks for the health costs of what's happening to kids' mental health. We're seeing a lot of bills, especially to protect kids, but these will affect all of us if these addictive elements are taken out of the designs. And I've studied the history of tobacco and food, and this game has been played before. You're responsible, then since you chose this, you're responsible, we're not responsible. The thing is, this whole argument breaks usually when it gets to children because nobody thinks they chose and nobody thinks they're responsible. So I think that's where we're going to start seeing more legislation, more change for all of us, because once these designs starts changing, and hopefully the business model, it sucks our time, will change, things will change. And in a way, we're sort of in the middle of this. So I think people can do some things for themselves, to try not to be online, whether like your friend, description of your friend who has a second phone. I put my phone on a timer for 20 minutes when I want to work. And I think these things are doable. The main thing is just to remember it's not your fault, and things will change when you do things collectively.
And that's such empowering information, because we, in our heads, we're the ones making the decision to grab our phone again. We're the ones making the decision to open up this app again. But we're bringing awareness, as you're saying, that this is constructed. It's constructed perfectly with a lot of engineering, with a lot of intention to bring us there. And then, like you said, the big tobacco, right, or whether it's whatever big industry that is harming many of us. When it comes to children, no, these children aren't choosing it. It's right there in front of them, and they're becoming addicted to. So, beautiful way to end that. Listen, Gaia, where do we find you?
GaiaBernstein.com. And my book, Unwired, is available everywhere you would get your book.
Yeah, and I'm telling you right now, it's right next to my bed, and for someone, it's so funny when I opened my drawer. It came in the mail, and I opened my drawer, and I guess someone in my house unwrapped it already and had it in there, and I go, "What's this? Unwired?" I go, did someone buy this as a sign because I'm always on my phone?" and then I saw it was from you, and I go, "Oh wow, this is really cool." So I have it on the side of my bed. I want everyone to go check out that book, and here's why. Because this is something that's part of our everyday lives. We're not talking about, some biohack that some people do. We're not talking about some place that people go on a retreat and experience about that. This is an everyday thing. Almost as common as breathing are we grabbing our cell phones for most people. This book is an awesome, awesome way to bring a lot of clarity. So if you resonated with this podcast, go check it out. Gaia, thank you so much for coming on the show, taking the time out of your busy day. I know you've been talking a lot. Your voice is shot from doing all these talks, but what a gift to have you talk to this wonderful audience.
Thank you so much for having me. It was a pleasure.
I appreciate you. Take care. Labels all over the supermarket. I know how confusing it can be. One thing says non-GMO. The other one says natural. The other one says grown in the sun. The other one says farmer fresh. The other one says organic. What the heck is it? What does it all mean? When you're in the supermarket, sometimes you see all of these greenwashing labels. You want to concentrate it down right to the truth. So today I'm going to break down 3 of the most important labels you need to know about. If you can read these quality assurance labels, you're going to have 90% of the empowered decisions you can make right out your hands. So let's get right to it. First, the non-GMO project certified label. This one's so confusing to so many people. And I don't think that was the intention of the organization, but overall, this label is pretty meaningless. I got to tell it like it is. Even if the organization didn't mean for it to be this way and they put all their hard works, I think their efforts are misdirected. Why? Because the label doesn't tell us much. All it tells us that the food in front of you was not utilized with GMO technology. But what does that mean? According to the FDA, GMO technology, or GMOs, is a plant, animal, or microorganism that has had its genetic material changed using technology that generally involves the specific modification of DNA, including the transfer of specific DNA from one organism to another. It sounds very sciencey and kind of weird, right? Now, that GMO modification hasn't been a problem for me, a big problem. We've hybridized so many foods over the years with a lot of genetic changes. But my problem has been the chemicals that have been used on these GMO crops, the pesticide that's been used, Roundup. And that's a controversial pesticide. And it's been shown to have a detrimental effect to our health, most pronounced in the cells that line our gut and our gut bacteria. Go back to listen to my show. If you really want to go deep into the weeds, go listen to the Monsanto paper show that I did, the expose on it. I went over all of the emails that came out from Monsanto, who is the distributor or the creator of Roundup. So if you really want to get into it, go back and listen to it. But really, when it comes to the non-GMO label, all it means is that this technology wasn't used to make the food, DNA technology. What it doesn't mean that there's no artificial colors, flavors, or preservatives. It doesn't tell me about anything with synthetic fertilizers or sewer sludge being in the food. It doesn't tell me about anything when it comes to pesticides being used on the food. Yes, if it's non-GMO, it can have pesticides. It can even have Roundup. It doesn't say anything about antibiotics or hormones used in these animals. It doesn't say anything about the feed that these animals use in the pasture. And it also says nothing about wildlife and biodiversity, soil fertility. It says nothing. All it says is that the technology used to make the food was not genetically modified. But at this point, it doesn't mean much. So let's move to USDA organic. Go for the organic label when you can. It matters. From a nutrition standpoint, some studies say it's the same. Some say organic is better. Okay, great. But from a pesticide residue standpoint, it is very important. And lots of food science pages say organic is a hoax. Conventional is the same. Organic doesn't matter. Pesticides are safe. And the answer is no, 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 and hell no. Let me clear this up. The biggest concern about conventional food is not the lack of nutrients, although many do lack when compared to organic counterparts. It's the way that food scientists see pesticides. They base their pesticides are safe argument in a vacuum. And what that means is that the chemical toxicity is derived in a per chemical basis. How lethal is a chemical to an animal at this dose, and what is the safe dose for humans? And you hear food scientists say the dose makes the poison. And these folks are living in the 80s with some flawed assumptions. And this is a reductionist statement without understanding the interplay of different variables, such as these chemicals interact with each other. They can synergize via the entourage effect. We know this. Various chemicals interact and create greater damage than alone in a vacuum. Number two, not all chemicals are water soluble that you just pee out when you're exposed to them. Some deposit in the fat. Some deposit in the tissue. They bioaccumulate over time. Now, if the dose makes the poison, how do you explain heavy metal accumulation? You eat enough tuna, even at a safe dose, over time, and you will inevitably begin to accumulate mercury in your system. And number three, some chemicals display a phenomenon called the non-monotonic dose response. And that goes against predictable or typical dose response patterns. So what is expected in chemicals is the more chemical that's in there, the more toxic it is. Some chemicals will show that as a dose increases, so does the effect. But the non-monotonic dose response, which is essential to understand and goes against the dose makes the poison, is actually a U-shaped curve. So even at low doses, there's a high amount of negative effects that we see in the body. And then even at high doses, we see similar effects. A lot of chemicals follow that. So this is the problem. It's not that the dose makes the poison. You can't always say that. It's not true for everything. And we can't be living in the 80s. No more reductionist science. We need to look at a holistic picture and see everything for what it is. So when it comes to USDA organic, what is the difference? When you see the USDA organic label, it's telling you that GMO use is prohibited, just like the non-GMO label, but also everything else. There's no artificial colors, flavors, or preservatives, no synthetic fertilizers, no sewer sludge, no toxic, persistent pesticides that are in there, the big thing. No antibiotics or hormones on animals. The animals are eating 100% organic feed from the pasture, and it's protecting wildlife and biodiversity, enhancing soil fertility, and it's regulated by law. So at the very least, USDA organic is far from perfect, but right now it's the best thing we have. Or is it? I'm going to talk about a new one that's came out that is far beyond better than all of them. Let's get right into this one. So the new label that is out, and it's growing, and for me offers so much more security. It's beyond USDA organic. It's regenerative organic. And to understand why this goes above and beyond, you must understand industrial farming methods. They're a problem. We thought many years ago that machines and chemicals were the solution, right, when it all started. But in fact, it's devastated our soil and our climate. Forecasts actually have predicted that global topsoils would deplete in 60 years at our current rate that we're going. While studies have proven that conventional industrial agriculture contributes to about 25% of the emissions that are driving the climate crisis. According to regenerativeorganic.org, with regenerative organic agriculture, we begin to rehabilitate the soil, respect animal welfare, and improve the lives of farmers. What they're doing is sequestering carbon, building up healthier communities that are actually reaping more nutritious and abundant yields that are going to you, right? More nutritious food, cleaner food with a deeper purpose. Now we need to take a more holistic view. It's not just about organic crops. It's the health of the soil. It's the health of the animals. It's respect of the farmers and the migrant workers, right? Big picture stuff. We need to zoom out now. We've been too many zoom in, me. We need to see a bigger picture. So in practice, this is what it looks like. What they practice is cover cropping. So there's crop residues or mulch year round, and it's bringing more nitrogen to the soil. That's important for the crops that are coming in next. They rotate the crops. They plant different crops sequentially on the same plot, and it's improving soil health and optimizing nutrients in the soil. Nutrients in the soil and better soil is going to align with better health for you, not only from the food that's coming, but the soil, the topsoil on the planet. The health of the topsoil on the planet is your health. Believe it or not. That's crazy to say. Oh, yeah, no, we're connected to farms. If you remember my show with Zach Bush, he went deeply into this. And when it comes to regenerative organic, they practice low or no-till farming. One of the worst farming interventions that have ever came out, aside from the use of chemicals, is the use of machines, tilling machines. And when Zach Bush went into this, he went into detail. Go back to my show, my second show with him. Tillage equipment destroys the structure of the soil and the soil microbiome, the microbial and mycelium network that is fundamental to the health of the earth and ultimately your health. They do rotational grazing for grass-fed and grass-finished ruminants like cattle. So they're moving around the pastures and they're eating high-quality soil and returning nutrient-rich manure. They do compost and of course, zero use of persistent chemical pesticides and fertilizers. So it's new. It's not going to be, you're going to go to Whole Foods, you ain't going to find all of it everywhere. Some products will have it. Regenerative Organic Alliance is formed by a group of experts in farming, ranching, soil health, animal welfare, and farmer and worker fairness. And it was founded by the Rodale Institute, Dr. Bronner's, and Patagonia. So what you want to look for is the ROA label. It's a nice little label with an arrow going back to the soil. It's really cool. I think in the next 10 years, it's going to be a standard where we look for something better than USDA organic. Keep an eye out. Keep an eye out, you'll see, but know where we're going when it comes to food labeling, and it looks like it's for the better. So I hope this show was really empowering for you. And I hope that now you can read nutrition labels with so much more encouragement and feeling good in your body about it. You're empowered. Go to the supermarket and see the difference and know what companies are doing to kind of like trick you into buying some products and know how to empower yourself. Gaia Bernstein, amazing show. She really went in on it. Again, empowerment around cell phones. Let's create some more boundaries on it. If you're looking for supplements, the best of the best, whether it's herbals, nutraceuticals, eco-home stuff, baby stuff, makeup, the best of the best on the Swell Score. I want you to check it out. Check out the Heal Thyself swag, hts.today. Sustainable, organic, beautiful designs. Support the show, rate, review, subscribe. If it really aligned with you, open the heart, share it with someone you love, and thank you. I will see you next week.